enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
"13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth."
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore, seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
"13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth."
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore, seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
Thirteen of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV. Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
Good evening from Texas Student Television here at the University of Texas at Austin. My name is Ariba Barmel, and last night was a key moment in this year's election cycle with the first presidential debate. CNN hosted former President Donald Trump and current President Joe Biden in Atlanta, where they discussed the economy, abortion access, and so much more. The race for the White House later this year is like no other, and we are here to break it down with our panel of political experts. On the far right of your screen, joining us tonight, we have Andrew McKiernan. Andy is the Executive Director of the UT chapter of Young Conservatives of Texas. Next, we have Professor Paul Steffler. He is in the radio, television, film department and has worked on numerous political projects. He also has a doctorate in government from Harvard University and was previously a political pollster in Louisiana. And finally, we have Professor Mark Strama. He is the director of the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life, and he has also served 5 terms in the Texas House of Representatives. So how is everyone doing this evening?
Pretty good.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well,
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your evenings today.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into any specific aspects of the debate, I wanted to hear from you. So what do you think is the biggest takeaway from last night in your perspective? We can start with Andy and move down the line.
Well, I'm not sure if there's any particular biggest takeaway because, in my opinion, I'm not exactly sure exactly how much this will actually affect the presidential race. By that I mean, I think a lot of people in the media today are kind of freaking out over what happened during the debate. I think it's a lot of overreaction a little bit from both sides because, Biden didn't have the strongest performance, obviously, and I'm hearing a lot of people on the right side say it's over, Trump's going to win, and I'm seeing people on the left side saying that Biden should step down and someone else should run, but, I think at this point in the race, and, it's kind of crazy to say because it's in June, but I do think most people probably have their mind made up. We'll obviously have to see how much the polls affect things, and what people actually say, how they felt in the debate, but I'm not sure if there's really a strongest takeaway besides, both of them kind of, in my opinion, performed about how I expected them to. Like I said, I think Biden showed up a little weaker than I expected him to, but I'm not sure if there's too much of a strong takeaway besides that necessarily.
Yeah, so are you saying, for the most part, it's kind of how you expected it to go?
It's about how I expected it to go. Like I said, absent, Biden did show up a little weaker than I thought he would. I thought it would be a little more evenly matched, but, Biden, I don't think he really met the moment as much as I expected and as much as other people expected. A lot of people in the media today were talking about how, one of the biggest things he should have done in the debate was kind of quiet his base and made people more comfortable with him running as the Democratic nominee, and he didn't do that. And like I said, people are kind of calling on him to step down right now. I think just a couple hours ago, the New York Times editorial released an editorial saying that he should step down, which is very surprising.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't get a chance to read that one yet, but we will get more into that later on if you guys have any big takeaways from the night.
Can I steal your line, Mark?
Well,
okay.
Well, the line
Which,
the line
I'm full of them.
well, yeah, but you wrote me earlier on today.
Oh, no,
you know, basically, in the first 20 seconds, it was weekend with Bernie.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of like a walking skeleton. It was kind of like the debate was over, you know, as soon as he walked in. You know, debates are all about...
By the way, that might be a reference that's lost on today's generation of college students, if that's
it's a fine film. You guys don't know Weekend at Bernie's?
I don't.
Oh, see? Now you got to explain it.
Well, Weekend at Bernie's is about a couple of guys that get invited out to their boss's house at the end of Long Island, and he's dead. Okay, and so they spend the rest of the movie moving the corpse around.
For some reason, I can't remember the plot, but they had to pretend he was alive to be able to stay out there all weekend, so they kept him kind of propped up everywhere they went.
He actually looked pretty good for a dead man.
He did.
And they actually did a sequel. Yeah. I think he launches back up. But in any case, you know, debates are all about style, you know, and image, you know, and, you know, President Biden couldn't have looked worse. You know, it was a disaster. Now, I agree with your comment that, you know, unless Biden drops out, which I still think is a fantasy, I don't think that this has that much of an impact on the election, because it was actually pretty low viewership compared to what they expected. I think they expected 70 million, and it was like 45 million. And I would wonder how many people actually watched it.
Nobody. But it doesn't really matter, does it? Because the way people see these things now, the clips on social media.
Totally agree.
If Andrew just dunks on you tonight and it's awesome and it would change everybody's mind about their political orientation and turn them all into conservatives, they're going to see it through social media. They're not going to see it watching this show, probably.
Don't disagree, Mark, but the thing about
It'll be on TikTok later.
But the thing about it is both sides are going to pick the worst stuff they can possibly find.
Yeah.
They already have zillions of things, some of it doctored, of Biden looking like he's, you know, Methuselah. Methuselah, by the way, is in the Bible. He's very old, just in case you don't know the reference. You know, and
older than Bernie.
You know, and Donald Trump last night was a bully telling lies. You know, it's the same old guy. You know, the majority of Americans don't want this race.
Okay. Yeah, to Andrew's point, it pretty much lived up to everybody's expectations.
Yeah, it's horrible.
I would say Andrew said something else important, which is it's June and everybody's got their minds made up. It's weird to have a debate in June. To your point about everybody having their minds made up, this is the first election cycle where you don't ask people who they're voting for. You ask them who they're voting against.
Yeah.
And this, even as bad as it was last night for Biden, and I would judge it to have been really bad, it probably doesn't change many people's minds about who they're voting against. Because you're either voting against a guy who you believe, I don't believe, but a lot of people believe is senile, has dementia, is unfit for the job, or you're voting against a guy who you believe is a threat to democracy itself. And I just don't know that the debate matters. I do think it matters in one way, and I am very curious. I don't have any evidence for this, but the Biden campaign advocated for an early debate, which is not something you typically do, especially as the incumbent.
Sure.
The rationale, the stated rationale was they needed to do something to disrupt the narrative. It's also possible that the rationale was, let's find out if he can hold his own.
Sure.
While there's still time to change horses if we need to. And it would be no offense to President Biden if people went to him now and said, it's time to take a break. I think I think it is time. I think, 4 more years of the hardest job in the world is a lot to ask of somebody that age. I think, frankly, that's true for both of them. And the difference between them is I consider Biden to be a sincere public servant. But no amount of sincerity can overcome the natural laws of aging. And it's just not the right thing to do, to prefer a candidate who is going to be 86 by the end of the term?
You know, it's...
And by prefer, I meant P-R-O.
No, sure, yeah.
PR, not prefer. I prefer him.
Yeah.
I prefer him, but I would not prefer him when there are other people who the Democratic Party.
And this is just, you know, I thought the low bar was, in terms of people disliking candidates, was Clinton versus Trump in 2016.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Nobody really wants this race. If you change the dynamics, and if Biden disappeared, which I think is a fantasy given the dynamics within the party, and it was Gretchen...
The only dynamic that matters is the dynamic within his head.
Okay, but if he all of a sudden disappeared, and Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, or even slick Gavin Newsom of California...
Why would the default not be Kamala Harris?
Because she's a terrible candidate. We can disagree on this.
Yeah?
She's horrible. Okay, I got nothing against her as a human being, but let me finish my thought.
Go ahead.
Okay, if one of them was running against Donald Trump, the election is over. Okay, on the other hand, if J.D. Vance, the hillbilly hypocrite, was running against Biden, the election would be over.
He'd win.
Yeah, and so you've got...
Probably true. If you believe that of J.D. Vance, you would say the same is true if it were Ted Cruz?
No, because everybody hates Ted Cruz. Come on, you know that.
Would you say, so who are the other Republicans who you think would walk away with it?
You know, the governor of Virginia, probably.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You know, and, you know, it's hard to say. A lot of the guys on the vice presidential slot, the boring governor of North Dakota, you know, Tim Scott.
Yeah.
No, Tim Scott would be terrible.
So basically anybody under the age of 70.
No. I'm saying that you'd have to be a serious candidate.
Yeah.
Whitmer and Newsom are serious candidates. Vance and the governor of Virginia are serious candidates. You know, most people that, you know, like Marco Rubio, what are you kidding me? Little Marco? You know, he got creamed in 2016 by, you know, Chris Christie. Has he gotten smarter? He wasn't smart to begin with, so it's kind of like it's... No, you got to have a serious candidate.
What do you really think?
Hey, we're on TV tonight, Andrew, and they want our opinions.
Yeah, that's right. Good point. Andrew, are there any... So he as a pretty open progressive, just offered some Republicans who he thought would be better against Biden than Trump is. Who do you think would be the Democrats' best candidate against Trump?
Who would be the Democrats?
I know it's not your job to solve their problems, but you know, like, who do you think?
Well, I'm pretty sure you guys just like Gavin Newsom's been like the person that people have been kind of propping up, saying, you know, look at this shiny new candidate. Yeah. Very likable, speaks well. He spoke after the debate to CNN, and
he did.
You know, he did, I think, actually a pretty good job trying to defend Joe Biden and his performance. I do think Gavin Newsom would be a good candidate in that kind of regard. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying I like him, of course.
Yeah, I get it. He's not saying he likes J.D. Vance, the hillbilly hypocrite.
Well, I don't like Newsom, but you know, but when Newsom debated DeSantis, he wiped the floor with him, and he's really good on TV.
Yeah, he's good.
So I think Newsom's a good pick. I know Pfizer from Illinois, people have been saying he's pretty good. Or no, Pritzker, sorry.
Pritzker.
Pronounce his name.
Yeah.
People have been saying he's good, and people have been debating him as well, though I've actually heard from a lot of my left-wing friends they don't like him as much, so I'm not sure there. So there's some good candidates. A lot of senators that I'm sure people would like. People in the Democratic Party like Kamala Harris. I know there's just a little bit of a debate there if she's actually good, apparently, but I know people there like her, so.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for starting us off. We talked about this a little bit already. You guys have touched on this, but like you said, we are very early on in this election cycle. It is still only June. There's plenty of time for many things to happen before November. So why does this debate matter right now, if it matters at all?
Yeah, Andrew started the argument by saying it doesn't, and I tend to agree with regard to how it affects the general election voters. I do think it matters insofar as I do think there is deep, deep introspection happening within the Democratic Party and probably in the mind of Joe Biden, though I don't know what's in his mind, about what gives us the best chance to win. Every Democrat I know believes that all that matters is winning, because they genuinely perceive Trump to be a threat to democracy itself. And the So the only calculus most of them care about is what gives us the best chance to win. And I think that's true for Biden, too. I think he entered the race, decided to run for re-election with the sincere belief that his candidacy gave the Democrats the best chance to defeat Donald Trump. I don't know if he still believes that today. I don't know. But I think that's what was important about the race. The underlying point of your question is right, though, because, look, we just had a debate in June, which will be mostly forgotten by November. We've got the president's, we've got a ruling from the Supreme Court coming on Monday on whether the president's immune. We've got his sentencing for 34 felony convictions in New York early July. We've got the Republican convention and the Democratic convention. Theoretically, there's another debate coming. And there's two hot wars raging around the world that could introduce who knows what unknown dynamics.
You know, it's an interesting way to look at presidential races and political races and just presidential popularity. There are certain things that happen that cement in people's minds something that is just really hard to get over. I mean, with George W. Bush, it wasn't the war in Iraq, it was the response to Katrina. Okay, the response to Katrina on top of the war, he was a dead man walking, you know, as a president with popularity. They get creamed in the 2006 elections. They lose the 2008 elections. You know, it was all over. He couldn't get past that.
Y'all are too young to remember, but there was a Kanye angle to that.
What was that?
You don't remember the Kanye angle?
No.
The very famous clip of him, it just kind of flips to him, and then he just says George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Exactly.
Very viral at the time.
And it was at either the Grammys or the MTV Video Music Awards. Do you not remember this?
No.
Oh my gosh! It was like an atom bomb, and it really did stick.
Okay.
To the same point you're making, it just stuck.
Well, if you analyze these things in terms of polling, you know, the problem for Biden, you know, if there is a problem, because this is so early, and because people's, you know, opinions are so well baked in, quite frankly, if the Supreme Court actually says that Trump is immune in any way on Monday, okay, which, given the Chevron decision today, you know, given a whole raft of decisions that they've made, you know what's going to happen? This is going to actually make the Democrats crazy, and they're going to make them want to defeat Trump even more. Okay, I know it's going to be disheartening, okay, but it's kind of like everything that happens, you know, is like catnip, you know, or some sort of, you know, fentanyl, you know, for both sides. So at this point, you know, do I think this kills Biden? You know, I agree with you, Mark. He shouldn't be running. Okay, he's going to be, you know, he'd be president until 86. You know, he should have retired after a better than expected midterm election in 2022, after a really amazing set of accomplishments with the Democratic Congress in those 2 years. He didn't do it. I think in part it's because a lot of Democrats were scared that if he dropped out, Kamala Harris would be the nominee, and I'm sorry, I disagree with you. She's a sure loser. Okay, it's kind of like it's, you know, just throw the election away.
Listen, I think there's another interesting dynamic in the discussion, both the one inside Biden's head and the one that people are probably having with him.
Right.
And it is people telling him he shouldn't run.
Right.
Are the same people, I would bet, telling him not to run in 2016. That it was Hillary's turn.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would say
he would have won that race.
That he would have won that race, and the world would look pretty different.
Yeah. It's funny how things work out. You know, it's you know, we're talking about Republicans. I think one of the interesting dynamics is going to be, you know, who does Donald Trump choose as his vice president? Now, it could be the boring guy from North Dakota, you know, who adds nothing to the ticket except for maybe a little bit of money. It could be little Marco Rubio, who doesn't add anything to the ticket. You know, the person that would add something to the ticket, at least in terms of, you know, newsworthiness, is J.D. Vance.
Tim Scott.
You know,
I agree with Tim Scott.
You guys, Tim Scott, you've got to be kidding me. You know, he's a strange man. Okay, he's not a very good presence. I'm sorry. Yes, he's African American. I totally disagree, but whatever.
He's generally well liked by the party.
Yeah, but that's not what they need. J.D. Vance is somebody who actually, he's a really strong candidate. Okay, he's really articulate. He took out a really strong Democrat in Ohio. Tim Ryan was a strong challenger. Okay, this is a guy that's ascended, okay, and I think he's presidential material as opposed to Tim Scott. I'm sorry. Now, I don't think that Trump is going to take him because he'll overshadow Trump. Okay, but if he did that, vice presidents who generally do not have any impact at all on elections, this would be interesting in terms of like revving up the base. But
I have a take on this, but I want to hear Andrew's take first because Andrew is the more thoughtful person about Republican internal Republican politics.
Well, I'm just going to say that I think we should probably, by we just mean more like the right side, probably pick a candidate that's more likable generally, because obviously Trump is very volatile. Everyone has their opinions on Donald Trump. And I do think Tim Scott's probably the best, most well-rounded person for that. I mean, J.D. Vance, he's good. He, like you said, he beat that Democrat in Ohio. But I'm not sure if there's really much that J.D. Vance adds that Tim Scott couldn't add. And also, Tim Scott, he's got like a very good story, and I heard it a lot of times with the primaries that came. But he has this very good story about his upbringing and how he really came from not a lot, though how he kind of beat the odds, and now he's in Congress, and a lot of people have that kind of story. But I feel like he would really add that kind of dimension to the ticket a lot more, because we're talking about Donald Trump, who the small loan of $1 million, he always has had at least some sort of wealth, and I'm not too familiar with J.D. Vance's story, but I think Tim Scott certainly would add the most of the short list that I've seen.
So here's my take. Harvard law professor Nick Stephanopoulos published an article in a law journal recently about how the realignment in politics has moved so fast that the party's policy positions haven't caught up with it. That, for example, Democrats have always opposed large political donations. They've always advocated limits on campaign finance because they were traditionally the party of
small donations,
of the small dollar donors and the working class. They are now the party of the doctors and the lawyers, and the federal campaign finance limits hurt their fundraising, but they haven't figured it out yet.
Right.
This realignment is moving slower in terms of the black vote, but it is happening. And if I were Trump, I'd bet big on it, and I'd select Tim Scott. And I don't know what Tim Scott's appeal is to African-American voters, but, I don't know if he has much appeal to them. But I'm not sure how, but Trump seems to have some appeal to them, more than any Republican who's come before.
Sure.
In recent political history. And if I were him, I'd double down on that strategy, because 10-20% gain in that demographic is pretty hard for the Democrats to find somewhere else.
It was interesting last night with Trump pounding in the immigration stuff, even though it was all, complete nonsense in terms of like crime. They're coming out of mental institutions or whatever. That was geared not to the base. That was geared to African-American men completely. Okay, you just keep saying it and saying it and saying it. And, I think it touches on a resentment, which is potentially, profitable in terms of gathering votes or at least slowing down Biden's appeal in the African-American community.
I should say, in my class, I tell people stereotyping is wrong. But in politics, you stereotype a lot, right? You look at demographics and you predict behavior based on it because you have scarce resources and you have to allocate them as optimally as you can. So you target your direct mail in certain ways. You choose which doors you target for door knocking campaigns. You make assumptions about people based on their demographic profiles, which are not always right because every person is unique, but which are generalizable because you have to allocate scarce resources efficiently. The black vote for Democrats the rural vote for Republicans is comparable to the black vote for Democrats. Imagine if Democrats had a chance to make a 10-20% dent in the rural vote.
Right.
It would flip Texas. If I were the Republicans, that's where I think I'd place my vote.
Right.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's also generally with like other minority groups as well. I mean, it's been talked about, you know, you hear it a little bit from certain commentators and people who say, like, you know, as America gets more diverse, as, you know, the white population becomes, you know, less of a majority and all that, people say, oh, you know, Democrats will win every single election or whatever it may be. But that's kind of dependent upon assuming that, you know, black voters, Latino voters, and all these groups just continue to vote Democrat. And that's, you're exactly right. Like, we're slowly seeing more and more of these voters kind of switch over to the Republican Party. And, you know, I'm not sure if I can really diagnose why that is, or, like, especially with, like, Donald Trump. Why is Donald Trump doing so much better than all the other Republican candidates, you know, for the past, like, 30 years with the black vote? But it's certainly interesting to see, and it's definitely kind of... I actually am not sure why, but I'm thinking it could definitely be more of a policy kind of thing. But, like, you know, a lot of...
It's rhetorical. It's the system is rigged against you. Everybody else is getting rich, and you're getting shafted. That is a message that resonates with people who have not seen much improvement in their socioeconomic mobility over the past 40 years. And that's true of rural Anglo voters and urban African American voters. And I think that is a rhetorically appealing message. It's why there is some overlap between Trump voters and Bernie Sanders voters.
You know, it's a stylistic deal of politics of resentment. He's a very strong figure. Okay, I may have thought of him as completely unstable last night. Okay, but, you know, he came off as in his out-of-control way in control. You know, and so as a strong man, you know, and strong men have appeal. You know, now I think many anti-Trump people are scared because what they see is a strong man in a very undemocratic context. Can I bring up some history here, just because we are talking about the debates? You know, it's always hard to figure out what the ramifications of a debate are going to be, you know, until retrospect. I mean, as an example, okay, in 1960, the first famous debate between Kennedy and Nixon, you know, people that just listened to the debate thought that Nixon had won. Okay, but unfortunately for Richard Nixon, people were watching and they saw a good-looking young John F. Kennedy and a not-so-good-looking Richard Nixon. You know, in 1976, you know, in a little faux pas, Gerald Ford freed, you know, a country in Eastern Europe, maybe it was Poland, okay, and it slowed his momentum, you know, for a part of a week, and he barely lost to Jimmy Carter. Maybe that was the reason. You know, in 2016, you know, I was watching the debate at a bar in Brooklyn, and
Trump was hulking around the stage.
And at the very end, they asked him if he's going to accept the election, and he goes, no. And I turned to a friend, and I go, the election's over. Well, you know something? It wasn't. You know, so, you know, I don't know what this means. It's kind of like, you know, again.
Oh, listen, I am absolutely prone to overreaction. In 2012, when I was still in office myself, and I had a pretty good relationship with the then political director of the White House. And the first debate, Obama just didn't show up. The pedantic professorial Obama showed up, not the politically charismatic Obama. And Mitt Romney cleaned his clock in the first debate. I wrote like a 4-page letter. And sent it by 8 a.m. the next morning. I was up all night writing this letter to the political director of the White House. When I think back how stupid that was for me to do. Like, first of all, he was like, you know,
Yeah.
you're a typical Democratic bedwetter, of course,
Yeah.
you know, and I was, and he blew me off. But also just like, what did I think? That some state rep in Texas was going to change White House strategy for how to do. And I didn't have any constructive suggestions. I was just venting.
Yeah.
Yes, I am prone to overreact to debates. That said, last night was bad.
Yeah, it was terrible.
I'm going to cut in real quick right here. We're going to quickly go to break, but when we come back, we'll continue talking about the presidential debate. So stay tuned.
13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
Welcome back to Texas Student Television. We are here with our panel discussing last night's presidential debate. So, coming back over to you, we talked a lot about VP candidates and a lot of things going on. So I want to zoom out a little bit more and talk about the debate itself, kind of more broadly. Debates are supposed to be about policy. We saw some of that last night. Maybe we didn't see as much of it as we were hoping to see. But for those few voters who are still undecided or on the fence, do you think last night was substantive and helpful for them?
No.
No. No. I mean, we got more on their golf handicap.
Right.
I mean, no.
Maybe that's how we settle this.
Maybe on the golf course, that they seem to want to duke it out somewhere.
With clubs, they could hit each other over the head.
It's such a terrible degradation of the democratic process. Surely we're better than this. For very different reasons, you had two guys unfit for the office, and there's got to be a way out of this.
Well, going to that point then, next we have Democrats calling for maybe a different nominee as the convention comes up. We haven't officially picked either candidate as nominee. So while it seems unlikely that it will be anybody but Biden, what do these types of discussions mean? What are the implications of these discussions happening right now?
First of all, I'm not sure. He thinks it's unlikely that it'll be anybody but Biden.
Yeah, but you're the one that knows people.
We disagree on this. No, I'm not. Let me be clear. Any speculation I venture today is not informed by any conversations with anybody in any position of proximity to the White House. But the only reason I don't think it's so unlikely because why would he want to run? I believe he ran out of a sense of duty because he thought he was the best candidate to win. I think he has to be reconsidering that. And so do the people around him. And I think that there are alternatives. I mean, I could get excited about a lot of the alternatives. And I could get excited about Kamala, and I bet you could too. If you kind of put the Beltway chatter about her aside and thought about what it would mean to the country to have the first, biracial female president of the United States who's sound and competent on the issues.
Yeah. I don't know, Mark. It's, most of my friends, most of whom are not in politics anymore, were basically, suicidal this morning. And they were suicidal last night, too. Yeah. But today Joe Biden gave a speech in North Carolina, and he was really pretty good. Okay, he didn't sound like a guy that was going to jump out of the race. I mean, he woke up. Bernie,
It's not going to make the clips from the debate.
No, I'm not saying, but I'm talking about his internal clock. The whole idea of would he drop out? Who's going to talk to him? Barack Obama? Barack Obama couldn't get Ruth Bader Ginsburg to retire.
Yeah.
So where do you think the campaign should go from here?
I think that that's a decision that is easier to make when you're actually having conversations with the principals, which I'm not. But from a distance, I think the campaign should go to where to the natural default, which is the vice president. And yeah, I think she can be a very compelling candidate. There's a lot of chatter that's, really based on unsourced rumors about her that for some reason it's common with vice presidents, I think, that they just become the subject of a lot of complaints within White House staff. I think she would have a chance to completely establish her identity as almost as if she were a newcomer. She's been quiet and loyal as vice president, and she would have to come out with a big splash and introduce herself to the American public in a short time frame, but not that short a time frame. I mean, it's 5 months till the election, and there's plenty of time for her to make her case.
Well, I'll just say I find it incredibly unlikely that Biden ends up stepping down. I'm not necessarily sure if there's really been anybody who's been president who's like, you know what, I'm good. The party's telling me to step down, so I'm going to step down. I mean, it's happened before. Like,
LBJ.
Or you don't get reelected, or, you lose election, and then, the party's kind of just over you. Yeah. It's very rare for a president to, actually just say, I'm good, I'm stepping down, especially because he's basically already ran, half of the campaign, and we're in June, and, I don't see it likely at all that Biden steps down, and I'm not sure there is a mechanism to force him out.
There is not.
Yeah,
at this point.
I think if Biden says I'm continuing to run, he will continue to run, and there's really nothing Democrats can do about that.
I can give you a scenario. Sure. After watching him last night, and again, all kidding aside, when I saw him walking in, I was going, this is over. I mean, I don't know what's going on, but this is over. If he has a health problem. Okay, I'm not saying he dies, but if he has any kind of a serious health problem,
or if he thinks he might,
then it's really all over,
right?
And he's got to drop out. I mean, he has no choice.
But what I'm saying is, it doesn't have to materialize for him to factor that into the decision he has to make in the next few weeks.
I guess so. I'll believe it when I see it. And quite frankly, Donald Trump has the same problems. The guy is obese. He's out of shape. He's 77 years old, and he could have health problems as well. He almost died, when he had COVID, so who knows?
Yeah, I'll say this. He was sharp last night.
Oh, yeah.
And it is true that by the end of this presidential term he's seeking, he would be the age that he would be older than Biden is now.
Yeah.
Which he says is too old to be president.
Right.
That said, I don't think we can have it both ways. I'm one who thinks he's a threat to democracy. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's a threat to democracy because he's about to kill over. I think he's a threat to democracy because he's not.
Yeah. Yeah. You get a point.
Okay, well, turning to some of the specific issues they addressed last night, they did briefly discuss the Middle East, but they kind of sped over it very quickly. It seemed like after last semester, we know that that's a big concern to students, protests going on here on campus. So what would you like to hear from candidates in terms of how they address that going forward?
I don't remember them saying anything useful on this subject last night. Did you?
Specifically, you're asking what would we like to hear them say about like free speech on campus and those issues, or was
About
that what
free
you're
speech,
asking?
sure, and about the Middle East and the war going on
And the war.
as well. There was a question posed about it to them last night, and it moved very quickly.
Yeah, they kind
So
of
quickly I missed
the
it.
questions they were asked. Like there was a question about childcare that I don't think we got a clear answer because Trump was asked it. He talked about something completely different. Biden completely ignored the question too and responded to Trump. So the Middle East, I think it was like very brief. I know something that people were talking about was Trump said that he would totally allow Israel to finish the job. I know that some people were shocked by that. I was not really shocked by that at all because that kind of just seems to be the Republican position on it. I think both candidates probably answered the question like how they probably should have. Like Joe Biden's kind of in a tough spot with it because on one hand you have like the more activism or progressives who are very much pro-Palestine. They want to see, you know, him like either say disrupt Israel doing its, you know, doing things in Gaza, or he wants to see them pull out or things like that. And there's already been people talking about how Biden and his administration may be telling Netanyahu to like stop doing stuff or trying to maybe destabilize the war cabinet. And then you have like more traditional Democrats who are more pro-Israel. So, and we're seeing kind of that struggle in the party I'm seeing. So Biden's kind of in a tough spot there. I will say Republicans are definitely just more pro-Israel, and Trump was just like, they should finish the job, which Republicans are just going to be like, yeah, good. So.
But that issue was a really clear example of Biden's problems last night. I mean, and also Trump's problems, because at the very end he couldn't help himself, and I believe he called Biden Palestinian. It's kind of like he just can't help himself. Okay, but on the other hand, Biden has a really easy answer on this, a really easy answer. Okay, the answer is, I will defend Israel, but at the same time, I am the only actor in the Middle East who's trying to figure out a solution. Okay, it's two sentences. I mean, what is President Biden thinking? Who prepped him for this debate? It's kind of like I've been waiting to hear this period, you know, for him during this entire thing. When you're the president, you have the bully pulpit, you know, and you're there to explain things. Same thing on Ukraine. This is not that hard to explain. Okay, he was better on it when he was over in Europe during the D-Day, you know, events and talking about the threat to Putin. Okay, but, you know, there it was last night. It was teed up for him. And it just, he wasn't up to the moment. And it really, it's problematic for his campaign.
Yeah, to your point, I think he's got a good story to tell. I think he's had thoughtful, nuanced policy in both the Ukraine war and the conflict in Israel. I think there is a good story to tell. I think his administration has been responsible and statesmanlike. I don't think he can tell it. And, you know, I think you have to, I think that is part of the job. You have to be able to do that.
I agree. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Well, going to another issue that was briefly discussed last night, January 6th, of course, came up, and Trump seemed to dodge the question. He brought up lies again about Pelosi. What does this tell voters about the way he was answering this question?
You know, I think he didn't get asked the hardest question for him to answer, which is, you were caught on tape asking the Secretary of State of Georgia to fabricate 11,000 votes so that you could win Georgia's electoral college votes. And that, you know, for all of his defenders, there's usually some way to give him the benefit of the doubt, because he says things in such squirrely ways that you can find a charitable interpretation of what he's saying and defend it. Or he says something horrible and indefensible, but it's not on tape, like the suckers and losers thing he said about dead military veterans, according to his then Chief of Staff, John Kelly, who he claims to have fired, but he didn't fire. John Kelly quit. So there's often a way for him to weasel around it, as he did on the suckers and losers thing, and as he does on the January 6th thing, because he did have the word peaceful in his speech.
Right.
While he was telling people, you're going to lose your country if you don't fight like hell, and while he was sitting on his hands when they marched into the Capitol trying to hang Mike Pence. But the one thing I don't know how anyone can defend is a phone call recorded by the Republican Secretary of State of Georgia, who recorded it because he knew that he was going to be asked to do something treasonous. Not just illegal, but treasonous. He recorded it, and in that call, Donald Trump directly asked him to find 11,000 votes to flip the election. How that doesn't get asked in that debate, I don't know.
But Mark, what you've got in a situation right now in our contemporary dysfunctional politics is that things that would kill campaigns, that would end campaigns, that would end political careers, don't make a difference anymore. I mean, they just don't. It's kind of like, it's astounding. Clarence Thomas, let me finish the thought. All the stuff with him and the donors, okay, that got a Supreme Court justice to essentially get kicked off the court,
That's right.
in the 1960s. Yeah. Okay, this stuff doesn't count anymore. And it doesn't count anymore because you've got two sides that do not pay attention to the same things. Okay, there's no Walter Cronkite. We're here in the Walter Cronkite, plaza. People would listen to Walter Cronkite, and what he said, would be meaningful. Now nobody is meaningful, and so that, if you hate Trump, you hear it. If you love Trump, you don't hear it, and this is really scary for the future of American politics. The country is dividing. We have states that used to be in play for both parties, okay, that are no longer, they're one-party states. And this is not just Texas, which is problematic in terms of the stuff that's coming out of our legislature, which is not backed by a majority of Texans, but, run as a Republican in California, run as a Republican in Massachusetts. This is not healthy, and that's part of the reason why you can have Donald Trump on tape, and it makes no difference in the way people think about him that's already plugged in.
Something that's interesting there is during the debate, I'm sure a lot of people caught it, but it's somehow not one of the most talked about things is Donald Trump, halfway through the debate, saying, "I did not have sex with a porn star," and yet no one's even talking about that.
And nobody believes that.
My 14-year-old daughter heard it on the radio, listening to the debate with her mom in the car coming home, and she asked me about it this morning. She's like, "Why did he say that?" I was like, "Because he did have sex with a porn star."
It's like Bill Clinton when he said, "I did not have sex with that woman."
Yeah.
Well, turning to a different issue from last night, there were a lot of false and misleading claims from both candidates. The numbers I have in front of me right now are CNN reporting more than 30 from President Donald Trump and at least 9 false or misleading claims from President Biden. How much of a concern is misinformation, especially misinformation from candidates, as we approach November?
It's the job of a candidate to be able to combat that. Okay, when you're in a race, Mark's been in a race, a number of races, and when somebody says something that's a lie or you think is a lie or something spurious about you, it's your responsibility as a candidate to fight it. Okay, that's what campaigns are for. And if you can't do that, then you don't deserve to get, elected. So it's, when Joe Biden is up there and he keeps hearing he's got the worst economy in American history, that our pullout in Afghanistan was the worst moment in American foreign policy. And what about the Iraq War with millions of people being killed because of it? It's kind of like, this is all craziness, okay, and it's his job to look Donald Trump in the eye and say, "You're a liar. Okay, this is not right." Okay, and if you can. It was hard for me to hear any of Joe Biden's policy stances, so I'm not quite sure what Trump would have said substantively, but that's part of the job of a campaign. Is it not?
Andrew, do you have
I think you pretty much nailed it. I think if Trump is saying something that's untrue, or if Biden is saying something that's untrue, it's the responsibility of the other candidate to say, "Hey, that's untrue," and then provide some background or fact or response to it. I mean, I think even in just like the opening statements, like both of them were saying things. I was like, I'm not sure about that, but they both kind of just ignored each other. Or if they did call the other person out, like I think at one point Biden said everything you just said was a lie. But then if you look back at what Trump said, it's like, well, you know, you can debate certain things, but like not all of it was lies. So now you're just confusing people further because like Trump, you know, probably according to CNN would have said some things that are true, so some things are not true. So it's like, it is definitely the responsibility of Biden, and I think that goes back to that whole conversation about like Biden's energy last night, like how skilled of a debater he is. You know, is he actually up to it? And you know, I said at the beginning, I don't think he really met the moment, because you know there were certainly times that Trump said something. I was like, oh, Biden can say this; it'll be a good moment for TV. And then Biden kind of mumbles his way through a response. I'm like, that was definitely not what Biden needed to say there. Biden did have some good moments, like on the January 6th discussion, he's like, Trump is a whiner, and then he said it again, and you know, we see it in social media. But there's a lot of opportunities for Biden to jump in and say something about Donald Trump, but he just kind of fell flat. He didn't really say, this is wrong because of X, Y, Z. He kind of just, you know, some of his rebuttals were good, but a lot of it was taken away from how he looked, how he was responding, and, you know.
I think it's an almost impossible task to fact check Donald Trump in real time in a debate, because the lies are so fast and furious. And by the way, it's hard to even characterize them as lies. I mean, he's a fabulist. I think he believes some of the lies. I've seen entrepreneurs who talk about the world as they envision it, and I think sometimes that's what he does. He thinks he thinks everything was awesome, right? And he thinks that his response to COVID was great, and he lies a lot too. But sometimes I think he just lives in a parallel universe in his own imagination, and so. That's why sometimes everything coming out of his mouth is just not factual. And how do you would spend all of your time debunking the lies and never delivering your own message? So I think it's hard. I think, but to a point you've been making, if Gavin Newsom had been on that stage opposite Donald Trump, he would have done it.
Oh gosh.
And he would have just demolished it.
Yeah.
And I think Kamala, with almost the same efficacy, would have done the same thing.
Yeah, it was a lost opportunity for Biden. So,
well, that's just not who he is. I mean, that's never been his strength as a politician, and now he's a much, lesser politician than he was.
I think he was actually hurt by the CNN rules, because I think in the debates 4 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, having Trump bully his way over everybody, and talk over everybody helped him, because it gave him more of somebody to respond against in terms of, again, the style as opposed to the substance.
The muting of the microphone ended up helping Trump. I still think it's the right thing to do.
Oh, sure.
I think that in a debate that wasn't those two guys, one of them lying, one of them really not all there, in a real debate, that's the way it should be. When it's not your turn to talk, you're not talking.
Yeah.
Well, we're reaching the end of our hour here, so one final closing question. I'm going to start with you, Andrew. What do you think are the issues that voters are thinking about, especially young voters right now?
Well, I mean, there is such a big divide right now when it comes to, who cares about what. Because I know for younger voters in particular, Israel-Palestine, it's very important. Climate change is very important. But I feel like for most voters, definitely the economy is a big one. If you go to the store and you can barely afford to eat, or if you can barely afford to buy gas, that's obviously going to be your number one issue. The border, we didn't really talk about it all that much, but that's been a huge issue. That's why Donald Trump was kind of just hammering Biden on it, because if you look at the approvals on that specific issue, people support, well, I don't know if they support Trump's position more, but he gets way more approval than Biden, so that's why he was just hammering him on it. I think those are probably the two biggest issues, but like I said, for young people, it's definitely those issues, obviously with the economy, the price of college and stuff like that too, student loans, and, that's a whole issue too. We didn't really talk about it, but Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness, So, I know I just kind of hit a bunch of issues there, but I would say probably the economy is probably the #1 issue. But for young people, I definitely think it's a little bit more.
I think it's the economy. I mean, I just don't buy Gaza as a big issue. I think it's a big issue among elite students at universities who want to camp out. It's just not a big issue. The big issue, I think, is, for young people today, how am I going to buy a house? How am I going to get a good job? And that's always the biggest stuff, and this is a real period of economic instability. It's such a weird time, and that our economy is actually better than every other Western democracy. Much better. Okay.
Biden can't deliver that message.
No, and illegal immigration actually fuels that economy. Okay, they're coming here for jobs. Yeah. And if you got them all out of here, good luck for construction and restaurants and service industries in Texas. So how do you make the problem with the young today is that if they feel unstable, if they feel unhappy, they're going to blame the incumbent. And that's Biden's dilemma.
I agree with all the issues y'all identified. I'd add abortion and democracy.
Yep.
Rule of law. I think that those two things, at the end of the day, those two things might be more important than any of them, though if you polled people, they'd say economy. But at the end of the day, there's a question of how much you believe the president's really going to change the economy versus how much you think they're going to change abortion policy, which the next president will have a profound impact on because they may end up appointing 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices, and rule of law, which the next president will have a profound impact on. The next president may have a marginal impact on the economy, but a profound impact on abortion and the rule of law, and I think those may be the 2 most important issues for young people.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us this evening and for sharing your insight with us. Really appreciate y'all taking your time out of your evening to be with us. All 3 of our news shows, Good Morning Longhorns, Texas News Primetime, and Tower Talks, will be back in the fall, and we will continue to bring election coverage this season. You can also follow our continued coverage throughout the summer on social media. So from all of us here in the studio, thank you so much for joining us for this TSTV News special, and we will see you back here in August. All right.